Good evening, everyone. My name is Jamie Chen Han, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. On behalf of the New York State Council of Health and Pharmacists, Education and Professional Development Committee, I would like to welcome you to today's part 2 of the webinar series, NYSCHP Chinese Herbal Medicine Miniseries. Tonight's program consists of 2 CE hours entitled Introduction to Traditional Chinese Medicine and Insights from National Chinese Herb Dispensary in Modern Healthcare. We are thrilled to have our speakers, Dr. John Chen and Dr. Thomas Leung, as our guest speakers. Dr. John Chen received his Doctor of Pharmacy from the University of South California School of Pharmacy and his Doctor of Oriental Medicine from South Baylo University of Oriental Medicine. He completed his postgraduate training in Herbology and Internal Medicine in Beijing, China. He serves as an Adjunct Professor at University of Southern California and University of California, Irvine, and numerous colleges and universities of traditional Chinese medicine. Dr. Chen serves as the editorial board member for medical acupuncture by American Academy of Medical Acupuncture and American Acupuncturist by American Association of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. He frequently educates the public on the benefits and traditional Chinese medicine in media such as the Festival of Health hosted by Los Angeles Times and complementary and alternative medicine documentary films by the Discovery Channel. Dr. Chen resides in Southern California, where he is a medical consultant of Evergreen Herbs and the chief author of Art of Medicine Press. Dr. Thomas Leung receives his Bachelor of Science in Pharmacy from the SUNY Buffalo. He has also received his Bachelor's of Professional Studies in Traditional Oriental Medicine and his Doctorate of Traditional Oriental Medicine from Pacific College of Health and Sciences. He is a 4th-generation traditional Chinese medicine practitioner and the chief medical officer of the Kamwo Herbs. He also holds academic appointment at Pacific College of Health and Sciences. Dr. Leung's background in pharmacology and Chinese medicine allows him to have a unique perspective between traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few quick points. For those who have technological issues during the presentation, please use the chat option to communicate to the office. Every effort will be made to assist for this resolution. For those who have any questions for the speakers, please direct them to the speakers and use the question box or the chat option. The CE code for this program will be verbally provided at the end of the program. So we'll provide the CE for the first hour in the chat. And next, I'd like to present our speakers. So for our first CE, it'll be Dr. John Chen.
Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you. Like Jamie said, I'm both an acupuncturist and also a pharmacist. And I've been doing this for about 30 years or 35 years. And I think one of the most interesting things, especially in the early part of my career, is that when I used to work as a pharmacist, what happened is I often find myself answering more questions about herbs than I do with drugs. And that is, when I work at pharmacy behind the counter, a lot of the patients know that I'm also an herbalist. So what they would do is they would browse the counters and then grab whatever herbs or supplement that they see, whether it's kava or St. John's wort or Shisandra, and then ask me, hey, what's this good for? Should I take it? Should I not take it? And that's quite interesting, that they will come to me and ask herb questions. And then the opposite is also true, that when I work as an acupuncturist in private practice, I find myself answering a lot about drug questions, where the patient wants to know if the herb I give them are compatible with the drugs, whether there are any herb-drug interactions or not. So some 30 years ago, it dawned on me that Chinese medicine practitioners are very well trained in Chinese medicine, and then Western medicine practitioners are very well trained in Western medicine. But there's a big divide between where there's a lot of information missing. So most pharmacists do not know about herbs, or for that matter, even Chinese herbs. And then most acupuncturists, even though we have one class in pharmacology, in most cases, that's not enough. So what happened is it's almost like Western medicine practice in its own isolation and Chinese medicine practice in its own isolation. And the patients are getting caught in the middle. There's not a lot of communication between the two. So over the years, I have been doing a lot of teaching, and as you can see in the next few slides, that complementary and alternative medicine have gotten quite popular over the last 20, 30 years. And one of the literature that I found is that as of 2018, there are approximately 38,000 licensed or certified acupuncturists. And that is a 257% growth since 1998. So overall, about a 10 to 12% growth, 10 to 12% growth per year. So the profession overall is doing very well. There are a lot of people that are interested in becoming a Chinese acupuncturist or Chinese herbalist. And at the same time, a lot of consumers are obviously using herbs as well. And what I also noticed is that in the first, I would say probably 20 years or so of my practice, most of the press, most of the media generally have good things to say about complementary and alternative medicine. But in the last 5 or 10 years, the tide seems to have turned, or the sentiment seems to have turned. Perhaps in the beginning, little was known, so most of the information was pretty much good information. But in the last few years, like I mentioned, it tends to be the opposite. A lot of times, the patient, if something is wrong with them, it seems that the blame is automatically placed on the herbs or on the traditional Chinese medicine, almost as if the herbs are guilty until proven innocent. And a lot of times, a lot of the bad news are in the media and they get recycled over and over again, even if they are not true or they are not no longer the case. So what I thought I'd do today is that I present some of the issues related to the safety of Chinese herbal medicine. And I think that's important because in order for traditional Chinese herbal medicine to continue to grow and thrive in areas outside of Asia, what it needs to do is not only does it have to be effective, it also have to be safe. Okay, so I think it's important for pharmacists, medical doctors, patients to understand what are the right expectations, because as effective and as safe as traditional Chinese medicine is, there are also some safety issues that we all need to be aware of. Okay, and here is just a little tidbits of other information. There are 10 states in the United States that make up about 75% of all the practitioners. And those 10 states are California, New York, Florida, Colorado, and so on. And the ones that are the biggest states are California, New York, and Florida. So I'm speaking from California. Dr. Leung is in New York. So these are the two biggest states. Okay, and even then, there are still 2 states that do not have acupuncture laws, and that's Alabama and also South Dakota. As of this moment, as of 2018, there are 62 active accredited AOM schools that teach acupuncture and Oriental medicine. So when I first graduated, there were very few people with cross training in both acupuncture or Oriental medicine with Western medicine. But I think they are quite a bit now, so I think that's a good trend. The more practitioners that are cross-trained, the better we will be able to communicate with each other and also to help the patients. So I think that is definitely a good trend. All right. So like I mentioned, what I'll do is I'll go over some of these major topics today. I think they are very important because while herbs are safe and effective in most cases, these are some of the issues that the acupuncturists, the herbal medicine practitioners need to be aware of or pay attention to. And as pharmacists, the more we understand, obviously, the more we are able to counsel the patients or at least refer them to the right practitioners or the right pharmacies. All right, so these are the main topics. Number one is what are some of the prohibited compounds or herbs? What are some of the restricted compounds and herbs? What about pregnancy and nursing? When can we use herbs? When can we not use herbs? There were a lot of bad publicity published about Chinese herbs and heavy metals. So I'll share some of the current rules and regulations with you, as well as what are the standards as far as microorganism is concerned, mycotoxin, and then also the herbicide and pesticide issues. And then finally, the issue concerning endangered animals and plants. All right, so those are the main topics that I will go through the next hour. All right, this first one is prohibited compounds. What I mean here is that Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, they don't really regulate herbs, or they don't really understand herbs, but rather they understand chemical compounds. So what happened is, when they decide to take certain actions, it's generally not toward a certain herb or toward a certain formula, but rather if they understand a certain compound to be dangerous, then they will take action against that compound. All right, and also from FDA's perspective, if you look at the name FDA, it stands for Food and Drug Administration. So everything they regulate is either a food or a drug, and Chinese herb being a subcategory of food, being a dietary supplement. So their understanding or their way for regulation is that food is not supposed to have toxic reaction. Okay, so when there is a compound, when there is something that causes a serious health risk, then FDA is compelled to take regulatory action. So one of the first things they did, and I believe this dates back to year 2000, is that there were some records of herbs that were used in conjunction with drugs. And as a result, many of the patients were noticed to have nephropathy. And as they dig in further, they determined that erythrolytic acid was the main reason for causing kidney damage. So Europe right away banned the use of herbs that contain erythrolytic acid. And then United States FDA followed suit. And in fact, at this moment in time, most of the developed countries in the world pretty much have all banned herbs that contain erythrolytic acids. So these are 8 examples of herbs that contain erythrolytic acid. So basically call us Erythroceae, Erythrochia fangqi, Erythrochia mopanensis, Erythrochia fortiana, radix, Erythrochia mollissima, Sarum, Cybodia, and also Fructus erythrochia. So what you notice in common here, of course, is almost all the herbs have Erythrochia in the name, because all these herbs belong to the genus of Erythroceae. And also there's a family of Erythroceae, and that herb is Asarum to the bottom right. But the bottom line is all these herbs belong in the family or genus of Erythroceae and contain erythrolytic acid. So as of year 2000, FDA placed an import alert to ban and prohibit the import of any herbs that contain erythrolytic acid. And this is the article that I was mentioning earlier. There have been cases of nephropathy or nephrotoxicity associated with herbs that contain erythrolytic acid. All right, and this is the subsequent import alert. All right, so what happened was, starting in about year 2000 or so, the import of this type of herb had been banned. FDA was very rigorous, I would say, for the first several years to make sure every herb that's coming into this country is tested to not contain erythrolytic acid. And to the best of my knowledge, there have not been any issues ever since then, because FDA has done an excellent job, and also the industry have done an excellent job. So they don't source this herb, they don't make this herb, they don't import this herb. But nonetheless, I talk to acupuncturists on a regular basis, and every once in a while, you still have patients that come to acupuncturists and they worry about taking Chinese herb because of this issue. And what I usually assure them is, number one, this is basically a case study, something that happened over 20 years ago, and it's no longer the case. And number two, herbs that may contain erythrolytic acid basically have all been tested before they can be imported into this country. So as far as the profession is concerned, this is really not an issue anymore. Okay, but every once in a while, you may still hear it, and that's why it's good to be aware of it. Okay, anyhow, these are the Chinese characters, the pinyin names for those same herbs. So yeah, so if you are more familiar with the Chinese characters or pinyin, that's what these herbs are. All right, and these are the laboratory test examples that I show you, right? So toward the bottom of this page, for an herb called PharmD Stephania, this herb is perfectly fine to make sure, but to make sure it's not contaminated with ursotic acid, test still needs to be done to make sure the result comes out as ND, which is not detected. So this is a test that was done by the manufacturer in Taiwan, and also a third-party test that's done in the United States to confirm that AA is absent, right? This is an example for Mutong, which is a kibia, the test from the original manufacturer, and once again, a test done by a third-party lab here in the United States. All right, and the same with all the herbal formulas that contain those ingredients. And by the way, when I say those ingredients, what happened is a lot of times one herb may have 2 or 3 names that have similar names. So for the example of PharmD, there is PharmD Stephania that is perfectly fine. There is also PharmD, which is Erythrochia, that contain erythrotic acid. So in the past, sometimes they were used interchangeably, and that's why they have similar name, because they have similar function. But today, like I mentioned, anything that contain erythrotic acid basically are no longer used. All right, so once again, the factory has to do one test, and then a third-party validation is done here in the United States. Okay, another compound that the FDA has banned is a compound called pyrrolidazine alkaloid. And the reason is because there's an herb called comfrey that is commonly used in Europe, and in fact is even consumed as salad. And then every once in a while, if it's consumed at a large dose for a long period of time, it is associated with hepatotoxicity. Okay, so when this issue is known, basically FDA bans the internal ingestion of comfrey. But if you want to use it externally, it's still fine because external use has not been associated with any problem. Okay, so what happens is that comfrey is on the FDA's website as an herb that is banned, but a lot of people don't know is that pyrrolidazine alkaloid is a compound that is present not just in comfrey, but many other European herbs, like the ones you see here, but also in some Chinese herbs. Okay, so it is important to recognize what these herbs are. So the herb companies, the practitioner, and the patients are aware and do not end up using those herbs. Okay, so this is the FDA's publication to remove comfrey from the market. But what, like I mentioned, what some TCM practitioner may or may not know still is that pyrrolidazine alkaloid is present in some Chinese herb as well. It's present in Guangdonghua, which is known as Fafara or Tassaligo. It's present in Peilan, Eupatorium, Chen Guang, Sinensis, and also Zicao anebia. Okay, so these are the 4 herbs that have been confirmed to contain pyrrolidazine alkaloid. Okay, so best not to use them. Another herb that's a little bit controversial is an herb called Leung, or known as Rika or betel nuts. And this is an herb that is commonly chewed in certain part of Asia, basically to get a rush. Okay, so it's kind of like people drinking espresso or smoking. Basically, this herb has a very strong stimulant effect. What also happened is this herb, when it's chewed, is associated with cancer, basically with mouth, with lip, and throat cancer, parts of the body that come in direct contact with it. But it's generally not, the cancer is generally not associated with oral ingestion as a Chinese herb. But nonetheless, because of the cancer incidence associated with chewing of betel nuts, there are a lot of literatures that link the two, and as a result, California EPA have declared betel nut to be a herb that may be linked to cancer. And as a result, if a product with betel nut was to be sold, it needs to have, in California, what's called a Prop 65 warning label, basically to disclose the consumer that this product may cause cancer. and so on. Okay, so as far as in California, most of the herb company that I know no longer sell this particular herb. On a national perspective, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, a little bit later in year 2023, which is last year, an import alert has also been issued by the FDA. So at this point in time, betel nut or anything thereof can also no longer be imported into the United States. All right, so those are the 3 herbs that are on the ban list as far as the FDA is concerned. So they do have some potential toxicity issues, so they can no longer be imported and used. Okay, so of approximately 10,000 Chinese herbs that are listed in the Grand Dictionary of Traditional Chinese Medicine, basically there are three compounds that are no longer available. But most of them, generally speaking, are safe and effective if used properly by TCM practitioners. Okay, this next one is an herb that is considered to be restricted, and this is herbs that contain ephedrine alkaloids. And ephedrine alkaloids obviously come from the herb ephedra. And for those of us who are pharmacists, this is a plant that contains ephedrine and also pseudoephedrine, right? So ephedrine can be used for asthma, and pseudoephedrine is used as a decongestant. So these two obviously are restricted compounds because in pharmacy, they are now as a behind-the-counter product. The patient needs to present their ID and be recorded before they can purchase anything with pseudoephedrine. So there is some health risk associated with this. But what really happened with ma huang or ephedra is that when it used to be available as a dietary supplement, a lot of the supplement company took it way too far. They combined ephedra with gotu kola, with caffeine, with other stimulants, basically for stimulant purposes, for weight loss purposes, for recreational purposes. And as a result, caused quite a bit of side effect and adverse reactions. So FDA eventually decided to ban this herb and issue a statement basically says that ephedra or ma huang is not a food because it's not safe to be consumed as a food. It is also not suitable as a dietary supplement because we don't supplement diet with it. But it did leave a caveat that ma huang is used differently by traditional Chinese medicine and by traditional Chinese medicine practitioners. Therefore, their ruling does not apply when it's used within that context. But what happened is the context is very poorly defined, leaving a somewhat of a gray area in which it can be debated whether ma huang is or is not available. But luckily, we have Dr. Thomas Leung, who's the next speaker. He has much more experience in this area. And in fact, he has worked with a FDA scientist and also is able to safely import and sell ma huang specifically to TCM practitioners for traditional use. All right. So under that specific circumstance, ma huang is still available and is still available to help to serve the patients who have a particular need for this particular herb. Okay, but overall, it's an herb that definitely should be treated as herbal medicine, not as food and not as dietary supplement. All right. Okay, so these are some of the other issues, like I mentioned, pseudoephedrine and ephedrine are something that the government is concerned with. Obviously one part is the FDA, and the other part is actually the DEA, because ma huang can be used as a raw material for those who know to make amphetamines. So anyhow, anything that has ma huang can no longer be used or is restricted. Okay, so these are some of the lab tests. Basically, we have for evergreen products, we have removed ma huang from the single herb and also from the herbal formulas. And these are to show that none of the ephedrines or pseudoephedrines are present in the products. Okay, Another question that TCM practitioners generally get is whether herbs are safe or not when it's given during pregnancy or during nursing. And this is a very difficult question to answer. And the reason is because in order to say it with complete confidence, basically you need to have somebody who is willing to volunteer and take the herb during pregnancy. And in that case, number one, you're not going to have any volunteers. And number two, it's also immoral to do such experimentation. All right, so for drugs, there is category of A, B, C, D, and X, to designate whether drugs are safe or not. But as far as herbs are concerned, such analysis is basically based on about 3,000 years of clinical records. So historically, through thousands of years and millions of patients of trial and error, there are a lot of herbs that are stated as contraindicated. Okay, so these are the ones, if you were to dig through all the material medica, these are the herbs that are considered to be contraindicated no matter what. Okay, so this is something that TCM practitioners do know and they do not use. And then there are some that are considered to be cautious or do not use. And basically what these are herbs that may be unsafe, make adverse reaction for the mother or possibly for the baby, all right? And among them, most people agree, but one herb that seems to be more controversial is an herb called Dangui or Angelica sinensis. Okay, and the reason is because this herb in Chinese medicine is considered to be a blood tonic, but at the same time has a very mild effect to move the herb. So it's perfectly fine to nourish blood because a lot of time when someone is pregnant, their body tends to be under a lot of stress, so they can become more weak and more deficient. So it's fine to tonify the blood. But at the same time, if you do move the blood, then the idea is you may create some instability for the pregnancy, right? So there are some literature or some practitioner that argue whether Dangui Angelica sinensis is safe or not. And my personal opinion is, I think if the pregnant mother shows signs and symptoms of blood deficiency or anemia or unstable pregnancy, then what happened is the benefit is significantly greater than the risk. And in fact, there have been many classical formulas, such as Dangui Shaoyaosan, Dangui and peony powder, or Baocan Wu You Fang, which literally means preserve pregnancy and carefree decoction, that specifically use Dangui Angelica sinensis as a chief herb to help to stabilize the condition, to treat the mother, to enhance the health of the mother, so she is better able to carry for term. Okay, so I think there are lots of clinical use for this formula during pregnancy to show that it's safe. But obviously, if there's no need, then there's no need to give this to the patient because Dangui has shown to have a mild stimulant effect on the uterine muscles. Therefore, if it's not necessary, it's best not to use it. And in fact, one final note here is that for women that are near term or perhaps that are late for their delivery, sometimes Dangui is also used to help to stimulate the uterine muscle so they can start with contraction. Okay, so Dangui does have that effect as well. Okay, all right. Nursing wise, generally speaking, use of herb during nursing is considered safe. And the reason is because even though theoretically it's possible for the herbs that are taken by the mother to be present in the breast milk, generally speaking, the amount is so little, it's not likely to create any health event for the baby. So as a TCM practitioner, the main question is, or the main concern is to avoid use of herbs that have a stronger effect, whether it's moving effect, purgative effect, laxative effect, or in traditional material medica is designated as toxic or more likely to cause adverse reaction. So the main thing is to avoid using those herbs. So if they do that, generally speaking, most of the other herbs are safe and have more benefit than risks. Okay. As far as heavy metal goes, it's a bit confusing because every different country has a slightly different rules and regulation when it comes to heavy metal. Okay, and the reason is because some countries consider herbs as dietary supplement, some consider herbs as pharmaceuticals, and therefore they are regulated differently. Okay, so as far as the US is concerned, US consider Chinese herbs or herbs in general as dietary supplement. So the rules are a bit more lenient as far as how much heavy metal is allowed. So if you look in the middle here, US Pharmacopoeia generally allows for 10 parts per million for lead, 3 for mercury, 3 for arsenic, and 3 for cadmium. EUP refers to European Pharmacopoeia. In Europe, Chinese herbs or herbs in general are considered as pharmaceuticals. So they are regulated the same as drugs. And as such, the requirements for botanicals is much more strict. So you can see basically the allowable limit is much lower for all 4 of these heavy metals. World Health Organization is somewhere in between because World Health Organization recognize that a lot of countries do use herbs as pharmaceutical, but at the same time, a lot of countries are developing countries. They also use herbs as traditional medicine. So in many cases, it may not be reasonable to regulate botanicals as pharmaceuticals. And that's why there's a lot of variations of what is considered safe as far as heavy metal is concerned. But I would say overall, if you were to meet either the USP standard, WHO standard, that should be perfectly fine. Okay, and as far as Chinese herb, there are some that potentially may have larger amount of heavy metal content. And most of these herbs are herbs that have been buried in earth for quite some time, or possibly herbs that are derived from the ocean. All right, so the first few examples are the fossilized bones from animals. And then you have 海带, 海飘香, 海藻, and so on. So those are the kelp, sargassums, and seaweeds type of Chinese herbs. And then lastly, you have some insects such as wugong, which is scorpion, such as centipede, and Chen, which is scorpion. Okay, so Chinese herbal medicine, even though we call it herb is an inclusive term that includes botanicals, minerals, and also possibly animals and insects. All right, so these are some of the examples that the herb companies and the practitioner need to look a bit closer to make sure they do not exceed the safety limit as far as heavy metal is concerned. Okay, so I would say, generally speaking, if the herbs are obtained through a healthcare practitioner, then that should be no problem. If it's bought over the counter or maybe online, then it's harder to know where they come from and whether the testing have been done properly. So this is an example of kelp and all the heavy metal tests that have been done. This is an example of Ostroconus. And like I mentioned, this is a fossilized animal bone. And all the heavy metals that have been tested. And herbal formula that contain those ingredients. Okay. And then similarly, microorganisms. Okay. And once again, there is some variation as far as how much microorganism is allowed in a dietary supplement. So once again, for EUP, which is European Pharmacopoeia, they regulate Chinese herbs as pharmaceuticals, so it's a lot more strict. But in the United States, APA, which is American Herbal Products Association, has a more, I would say, a more realistic or reasonable limit. And the reason is because, once again, you know, when you think about dietary supplement here in the US, that actually is a very, very big umbrella. That includes Chinese herb, that includes European herb, that includes tincture, that includes even juice or food or bars, and so on and so forth. Okay, so different products have different forms, have different risk to microorganism. So APA's recommendation is slightly different from that of EUP, which is European Pharmacopoeia. Okay, so once again, product needs to be tested for each and every batch. Okay, A couple other concerns that's quite important is regarding mycotoxins. And this has to do with dietary supplements and very much has to do with herbs or agricultural food as well. And basically what it is as food, herbs, vegetables, and stuff grow and harvest, the farmers need to be very careful as the food is harvested to make sure they are not exposed to too much water, too much moisture, because if they do, then what's going to happen is mold is going to grow. And as mold grows in these products, they're going to produce toxic byproducts known as aflatoxin and ochratoxin. And this is the way that the mold defend themselves against bacteria. But once these mold byproducts get into the food, basically that food needs to be thrown away because those toxic byproducts, whether it's aflatoxin or ochratoxin, can be quite a hazardous to health. Okay, so this is an example of corn or peanuts that have been infested with mold and aflatoxin as a byproduct. So what happened is aflatoxin is quite toxic to the liver, and in fact, it's also carcinogenic. So not only is it a hepatotoxin, it is also a carcinogen. Okay, so this is something that's very important for the food industry and also for the herb industry. And once again, Europe regulates botanicals as pharmaceuticals. So their allowable limit is 2 parts per billion, 2 ppb for aflatoxin B1, which is the most toxic out of the 4 aflatoxins, and 4 for the total amount, B1, B2, G1, and G2. APA recommends 5 and 20, and US FDA recommends no more than 20 total. Okay, so once again, if the herb product, if the fruit product meets any of these criteria, it's generally considered to be safe. All right, and these are some of the Chinese herbs that may have more issues with mold. So once again, the farmers need to be more cautious when they harvest the herb, harvest it, dry it right away, and avoid it with water, avoid with moisture, so mold does not become an issue. Okay, so once again, when these products are imported, it's important for them to be tested for aflatoxin B1 and also total. So once again, in this case, it's ND or non-detected. And then if necessary, they are also tested through third party. So in this case, this is an example of a product that did not pass. As you can see here, the result is 35. So every once in a while, this is called OOS, out of spec. In this case, when it happens, the product needs to be destroyed. All right, so this is an example of another herb called polygala. Okay, third party test, and so on and so forth. Okay, so there, I guess every once in a while you'll see in the media where the media will say herbs are not regulated, you know, and that's why there's a lot of quality issues with the herb. And generally, my response to that is I beg to differ. They are, you know, obviously thousands of herb companies out there. Not all of them are created equal. You know, there are some that are very serious when it comes to quality control, and they take quality control and testing very seriously. And possibly there are some that do not do quite as much testing. Okay, so yeah, you know, there are in fact a lot of rules and regulations that supplement companies must follow. And these are some or many examples that I'm sharing with you as far as laboratory testing goes. All right, so we mentioned earlier that aflatoxin can be a hepatotoxin, and ochratoxin is another byproduct from the mold, and this is an example with grapes. And ochratoxin is primarily nephrotoxin, but it could also be a hepatotoxin and also teratogenic and immunotoxic. All right, and in this case, the European Pharmacopoeia allows for between 3 to 10 maximum ppb. And then interestingly, APA and US FDA actually do not have a specific safety limit for it. But nonetheless, for herbs that may contain or that have a lot of sugar, you know, carbohydrates and so on, those are the herbs that are more likely to have mold that grow on them. So in this case, you have goqizi, which is lycium, and also licorice, 甘草, or also known as glycyrrhiza. Okay, so these are the two herbs that are more likely to have ochratoxin issues. So we nonetheless test for it, even though FDA does not require it and APA does not require it. But we feel strong enough that it needs to be tested. All right. And then one other issue that's very important, of course, is the possible presence or hopefully the absence of herbicide and pesticides. So the three main categories of herbicide and pesticides are organochlorine, organophosphorus, and also the pyrethroids. So these are the three main categories that may be used and ideally are screened. And the difficulty with this is it's sometimes hard to know which herb may or may not have it. So generally speaking, herbs that are more expensive are more likely to have herbicide and pesticides because the grower, the farmer want to make sure they have the maximum harvest. So they have more incentive to spray herbicide and pesticides. But the trouble is you can have farms that are next to each other. And where one farm is spraying some herbicide and pesticide, but the other farm right next to it is not. But then there's an issue called the drift. And that is as one farm sprays it, the wind will carry some of it and bring it to the farm next to it. Okay, so even though the farm two have not sprayed any herbicide or pesticide, it's theoretically possible to also have some as well. Okay. Another thing that's very important is, unfortunately, we live in a world where there are many herbicide and pesticide that are basically everywhere. It's in the air, it's in the water, it's in the soil, and to a point where it is almost impossible to completely eliminate it. All right. So chances are most of the food that are bought in supermarket will contain a small trace amount. None of it is really going to be completely herbicide and pesticide free. Okay, so I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but that's basically the state of our environment. And as far as herb is concerned, the two herbs that are most likely to have it, or the ones that we test to make sure they don't have it, are ginseng, which is the Asian ginseng, and also Xiyangsen, which is the American ginseng. And the reason is because these two herbs are two that are frequently consumed. These are two herbs that are relatively expensive, and therefore it's important to test them. All right, so once again, ginseng, this is a test that is done by the manufacturer in Taiwan. Okay, the test for DDT, BHC, PCNB, but the main one is quintasine, because quintasine is actually a fungicide. And the main problem with ginseng is the growth of the fungus. So quintasine, if is to be used, it's most commonly used in ginseng products. Okay, and this is a certificate of analysis that contain a cross examination of all the possible herbicide and pesticides that have been tested. All right, and this is another one for a herbal formula called Ba Zhen Tang, a formula for tonifying the qi and blood. And this is one for 治百地黄丸. So basically what is done is we test in Taiwan, okay, and then we also do random third-party tests here in the United States. Okay, and one other topic that I want to talk about is herbs or animals that are considered to be endangered animals and plants. And we hear this once in a while, right? Especially in Chinatowns, where you have consumers that protest Chinese herb that may contain tiger bones or musk from deers or rhinoceros horn and so on. Okay, so my reply to that is, I wouldn't, obviously I cannot say with 100% certainty because there are always exceptions, but I would say 99.999% of the time, these are not used at all. Okay, so you don't have anybody that produce it, anybody that import it or use it, at least not in 30 plus years of my experience. I have not seen any of these herbs used. Okay, but what's more common is that there are in fact a lot of herb in what's called the Appendix 2 of CITES, which is the endangered animals and plants. And what Appendix 2 means is that yes, these are plants and animals that may be endangered, but what happened is if they are used, these are ones that are specifically farmed for medicinal purpose, and only the ones that are farmed are then introduced into commerce. So none of it is taken from the wild. It doesn't affect the endangered species of these plants. And in fact, for that matter, American ginseng is actually an endangered plant. Okay, but what happened is most of the ones that are sold in the commerce are farmed in Wisconsin or farmed in Canada. Okay, and that's why you can have such a big supply of American ginseng to meet the market demand. Okay, so same is true with many of the herbs that come from Asia, including枸杞, Spadium, 红景天, Rhodiola, 木香, Sosaria, 肉苁蓉 是 Stanchis, 天麻, Gastrolia, and so on. All right, so if you have, herb companies that sell these herbs or consumers that buy these herbs, generally speaking, they are all going to be Appendix 2, which is endangered plant, but they can be grown, they can be harvested, they can be sold as long as they don't take from the wild. And when these herbs are imported for commerce, what's called a CITES certificate is required. And this is a certificate that comes from the original manufacturer to the exporter, to the importer, and if they are somehow exported to another country, then a re-export permit needs to be issued. Okay, and basically what they do is they track the quantity that were grown or exported or imported. So every single kilo or every single unit needs to be accounted for. Okay, so that's the purpose of the CITES permit. Okay, so this is a CITES permit for some of the herbs that are produced, exported, and imported. Okay, and these are examples of Stanchi. The one on the left is a CITES item, so it cannot be used. The one on the right is not. Okay, so that one is perfectly fine. Okay, so this is my quick presentation for some of the safety issues associated with use of traditional Chinese herb today. Another issue that's very important, but since we don't have enough time, I did not go into, and that is herb-drug interactions. And I feel from a clinical perspective, that is a much more important issue because we all know people that take drugs and we all know people that take supplements. So one of the questions that is frequently asked of pharmacists, herbalists, acupuncturists, MDs, and so on is whether they are compatible or not. Okay, so in the last 30 years or so, I feel we have come a long way because the very first time I taught that class on herb-drug interaction was about 35 years ago. And that was when I first graduated from acupuncture school and went to pharmacy school. And my acupuncture friends would ask me to give them a course on herb-drug interactions. And back then, all I did was I presented the theory of pharmacokinetic interaction and pharmacodynamic interactions, but there were no actual examples of herb-drug interactions. So all we have to go with is theories. There were no actual cases. But fast forward some 30, 35 years, there's actually a lot of data now available. So some of the more significant herb-drug interactions are known. And so practitioners, whether it's TCM practitioners or Western medicine practitioners, now have a good idea. And you can also find a lot of such information online, either PubMed or many different other websites. But in any case, I found this to be quite interesting. And what I'm trying to say here, these are a lot of Chinese words. Basically, this is a guy juggling many plates on a stick and trying to keep them all up at the same time. And consider each one of these plates as some as Western medicine, some as Chinese medicine, some is safety, some is efficacy, some is toxicity, some is herb-drug interaction, and so on. So as a medical doctor or pharmacist or TCM practitioners, practice today is ever more complicated than before. You can't just practice what you were taught in school. You definitely need to have continuing education in order to continue to learn not just your own dedicated practice, but also all the other modality out there. So as pharmacists, we also need to learn something about herbs, something about supplements, whether they can be used safely with pharmaceuticals or not. And only when we do that, can we provide the best care for the patients. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me to give you this short presentation today. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to let the moderator know. Oh, one last thing. For those of you who are interested in learning more about Chinese herbs, here are some references as far as textbooks go. These are two books. One is called Materia Medica, one is called Formulas and Strategies. And in Chinese herbal medicine, you need to learn both. Basically, Materia Medica is the information about individual herbs one at a time. But generally speaking, in herbology, we don't use one herb at a time, but rather we combine them in order to get the most out of the herbal formula. So the idea for the combination is some of the herb will treat the cause, some will treat the symptoms, some will have therapeutic effect, but also side effect. Therefore, other herbs may be needed in order to minimize or address the side effect. And that's why herbs are usually combined like a recipe in order to make up a formula that has the maximum therapeutic effect and minimum side effects. And then these are two other books. These are the ones written by my sister and myself. One is called Chinese Medical Herbology and Pharmacology. So this is for the single herbs. And then the one on the right is Chinese Herbal Formulas and Applications. So that's for the formulas. And my approach has been to try to bridge Chinese medicine with Western medicine. So as I write about Chinese herbs and their traditional uses, I also try to explain them from Western pharmacology and Western research as much as I can. Hopefully TCM practitioner and Western medicine practitioners can both read the same thing and then be able to communicate with each other. Okay, and then interestingly, there's a lot of people in Europe that are also interested in Chinese herbs as well. So both of my work have been translated into German. So there you have it. Okay, and yeah, this is my personal contact information. If I don't get to the questions today, feel free to give me a call or send me an email.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chen. We have a few questions. So what resources would you recommend to evaluate the drug interactions and dosing information if patients are asking about how to use traditional herbs?
I would say the best thing to do is ask them to seek consultation from a qualified practitioner. Because as a pharmacist, when I went through USC Pharmacy School, we have 1 hour class on complementary and alternative medicine. And basically, the person that came in to talk to us was an acupuncturist and also a pharmacist. And he talked about, something like 10 most commonly used herbal product in pharmacy shelves. So basically, I would say not enough to educate the pharmacist. I don't know how pharmacy education has changed since then. Hopefully a little bit more education, but maybe not. What I'll do is there are actually quite a few good articles. I'll post them in the chat. Then you can get online. That will be a good primer to learn about the commonly used Chinese herbs. And as far as website is concerned, there are some websites that are good references to go to, such as the NIH and CDC websites, and also PubMed websites. But they focus more on the commonly used herb in the US today, but not so much on the Chinese herbs. So I think database for Chinese herbs and drug interaction still has ways to go. We're not quite there yet.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah, we would love those resources to share with the audience. Sure. Another question is, in modern medicine, we use randomized controlled trials to assess clinical efficacy and placebo. Is this the same with Chinese herbs to assess clinical efficacy?
Well, that's another thing that's a chicken or egg kind of thing. And the reason I say that is because randomized controlled trial takes years and years to do and probably hundreds of $millions to do it. Okay, so what happened is I actually interned with Glaxo for 1 summer, so I have some front row experience with how drug companies work. What happened is you really need to be able to patent a molecule in order to have a 10, 15 years of exclusive right to sell the drug and recuperate your investment. And the investment can be hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay, so in the big pharma, they have incentive to do that, and they have the finance to do that. But what happened with botanical product is that these are herbs that have been around for thousands and thousands of years. In fact, far longer than we have as humans. So what happened is nobody owns these herbs, nobody owns these botanicals. It's very hard for somebody to have the financial incentive to invest to do RCTs for these herbs. And if that happens, then what's going to happen is once the study is done, you're going to have, hundreds of Me Too companies that says, oh, we also have the same thing. So for that matter, these type of research will have to come from either universities or for the government. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard. For that matter, I do know there are some herb companies, some universities that are trying to do that, okay, on a limited basis. So far, I think the most successful is probably a herbal formula called Huang Qin Tang, which means Scutellaria decoction. And it's a formula historically used to treat inflammatory condition of the intestines. And what they are doing now is, this is actually a research done by Dr. Chen at Yale University Medical School. And he is using this formula, or he's studying the use of this formula to treat chemotherapy-induced inflammatory bowel condition. And what they have found is that this herbal formula contains one herb that is a heat-clearing herb, so it has anti-inflammatory effect, and 3 herbs that are nourishing herbs. So what they found is that the heat-clearing herb that has anti-inflammatory effect is able to treat the inflammatory aspect of the chemotherapy-induced inflammation. And there are also many Western drugs that do that very well. But what they found to be most beneficial is that in addition to inflammation, many of the chemo drugs damage the linings of the intestinal tract. Okay, but in Western medicine, there's no good option to help to restore the digestive tract health. Okay, so the main benefit of the formula is not so much in suppressing the inflammation, but rather to rebuild the digestive tract after it has been damaged. So this is an ongoing effort for these 10 years now. Okay, they started quite long ago. There are a lot of medical journals that have picked up on this study. There are also a lot of retail journals, including Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, and so on, I believe have all written about this particular research. So like I said, this is 10 plus years of ongoing effort. They are in phase 2 clinical studies, and I don't know how much farther they have to go. But as far as I know, this is probably the most serious effort to try to do clinical study and get the FDA to approve it as a botanical drug.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chen. We really appreciate your talk. And thank you for your time.
Okay, yeah, you're very welcome.
Thank you. So our next speaker is Dr. Thomas Leung. And I'll let him take the stage.
Okay, hello everyone. Okay, so let me just share my Okay, hello everyone. Greetings, esteemed members of the Council of Health System Pharmacists. I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude to Jamie, Chen Han, Jason Hao, and the Education and Professional Development Committee for extending the invitation to address this distinguished group. It is indeed an honor to have the opportunity to present and shed some light on the operational aspect of a contemporary herbal dispensary. My name is Thomas Leung, and I'm currently serve as the owner and operator of the Kamwo Meridian Herbs, a third-generation Chinese medicine herbal dispensary located in New York City, with a rich history dating back to its establishment in 1973. Much like many of you, I hold a pharmacy degree having graduated from University of Buffalo's pharmacy program back in 1992. After gaining experience in the retail pharmacy sectors for a few years, I made the decision to return to my family's business on a full-time basis in 1994. And soon thereafter, I recognized that my pharmacy degree had its limitations within this profession, this new profession. So consequently, I embarked on a journey of further education and enrolled in the Pacific College of Health Sciences, graduated with a master's degree in acupuncture and Chinese medicine in 2000. And after that, I earned my doctorate degree in 2017. Additionally, I had the privilege of serving as an adjunct professor at the school for, I guess, over 20 years now. So that's a little bit about myself. Okay, so let's just jump right in. So let me introduce, let me move this out of the way. It could be easier to see. Okay, so let me introduce a little bit about our company, Kamwo Meridian Herbs. We are a traditional Chinese medicine herbal dispensary. We're founded in 1973, and we hold the distinction of being the oldest continuously running TCM dispensary in the United States. With 4 generations of Chinese medicine experience, we boast a rich legacy of expertise. So what is a traditional Chinese medicine dispensary? Well, it means that we generally sell herbs and herbal products that are used in the context of traditional Chinese medicine. So for example, we don't sell Western herbs. We don't sell herbs from other parts of the world, or we don't sell Western medicine. It's just herbs that are used in traditional Chinese medicine. And they are not necessarily all indigenous to China, because people have this idea. So they could be herbs from around the world. For example, herbs could be from Korea, they could be from Malaysia, they could be from the Middle East, for example. Frankincense and myrrh is not indigenous to China. But these herbs are used in the context of Chinese medicine. So that's why they're included in the formulary. My great-grandfather is also in the herb business. Started in China, then my grandfather in Hong Kong, and then finally my father, along with my grandfather, they moved here in the United States to start the business in the early 70s, and we just celebrated our 50th year. You see in the slide here, our staff consists of New York State licensed acupuncturists who are certified to practice herbology within the scope of their license. So we have on average 2 licensed personnel on duty at all times. And in New York State, the acupuncture license also includes herbology. So the people who have the license also can practice herbology. They meet the minimal educational standards, and they're certified in herbology. And we have at all times 2 licensed personnel on duty, and they're there to provide expert guidance for the dispensary, to oversee the dispensary duties. We proudly serve not only our local community, but also have a national presence reaching all 50 states and beyond. You know, this is one of the things when people come in and they pass by our establishment and they see it and they think it's like a local herb store. And on the surface, it seems that way. But what they may not know is that we are actually a national dispensary. We ship herbal formulations. We provide dispensary services all across the country, 50 states, Canada, a lot in Canada, as a matter of fact, and the UK, and also in the EU, where in the EU and Canada, their regulations are much more strict. So people they have to go through an MD to get herbs, and a lot of their MDs and Western practitioners are not versed, and they're not trained in herbal medicine. So they often have trouble finding it. So we find ourselves in a position where we have to provide services to them. So let me talk a little bit about our dispensary services. Compounding of raw herbal prescriptions, assembling raw herbal ingredients in precise accordance with the details of each individual prescription. So this is compounding of raw herbs and This is the most common type of prescriptions that we have that comes in. And compounding prescriptions involves much more than just assembling ingredients, right? A number of factors must be taken into account. For example, determining which herbal ingredients should be placed in a gauze bag. For example, if they're small seeds or if they're powder, they must be bagged. If not, when you cook them, they float all over the place, and that's not a good thing. Or whether certain herbs should be packaged separately to accommodate the variation in cooking times. For example, cinnamon is commonly used in Chinese medicine. That has a volatile oils that if you cook too long, it'll be lost in the decoction, and it'll just, your house will end up smelling like cinnamon, but your tea will not have much cinnamon in it. So oftentimes what we do is we package it separately. So we mark and say, hey, please, you can just cook it for only a few minutes. So the technicians and the people who work in the dispensary staff, they have to accommodate for these things. So it's not just a matter of assembling the ingredients together. Let me see. The next service is compounding, cooking, and vacuum packing of custom raw herbal prescriptions in liquid tea form. Raw herbal prescriptions are cooked and packaged on site. So we have a facility on premises here that will take the herbs and we will cook it, and then we will cook it and then we pouch it and we package it in these little liquid pouches. These are vacuum packed pouches. And this is actually we open it up the back of house for people to come and tour, and they can see how the sausage is made, you want to say. And this is actually a very common form now that people would request because they don't like to have to cook at home, and it also increases patient compliance. And we'll talk a little bit about that in detail in subsequent slides. Another service that we have is compounding of herbal granule prescriptions. These are extracted and concentrated form of raw herb, and they are compounded to prescription specifications. So these are just concentrated extracts of raw herbs, and they physically resemble instant coffee. Okay, so these are what, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Basically, these are herbs that they've done low temperature extraction, and they're put into a polysaccharide, and that's another dosage form of herbs that's used. Next, we have dispensing formulations in tablets, pills, and other finished manufactured products. This is when practitioners prescribe pre-made manufactured products. It's relatively popular. This is not actually compounding, right? Because these are just finished products, but we do dispense those, and they're relatively popular. There is a downside, though. The downside is that you're not, you cannot customize, right? You cannot customize, you can't change the formulations. This is already pre-made. And, that may not be such a big thing in other disciplines, but in Chinese medicine, is actually a big thing because in Chinese medicine, much of what we offer a practitioner, the clinician, is customized, tailored therapeutic options for your patient, right? Because every patient may present differently. So it's definitely a compromise here, but on the other end, it is convenient, it is cheaper, and it's available. So that's another option for practitioners. Next, we have dosage review of all formulations, including manual review of any dosage overrides by trained staff. So the dosage review, as pharmacists, right, we all do that, right? Our dosage overrides are reviewed by licensed practitioners. So when practitioners put in a prescription, a custom prescription through our electronic prescription system, it does have guidelines, and if they go over a certain guidelines, it would give you a warning, and you can override that. The practitioner can override that, but the system will make a mark. And then on the other end of it, on the dispensary end, the pharmacy end of it, we will review by trained licensed staff individuals to make sure that it is safe. We always reserve the right not to fill a prescription if we feel that it is not safe. Compounding, topical formulations, example, salves, compresses, soaps, and things like that. Yes, so we also do that. It's not as common as some of the other ones, the raw herb prescriptions and the granule prescription, probably because it's there's a lot of labor involved with these, and but we do that. And we'll talk about that in a subsequent slide. Two more things that not listed on the slides here is clinical consultation for herbal practitioners. I, as the licensed herbal practitioner, was certified in herbology and also being an herbs professor. There's a few of us on staff. We often discuss therapeutic options with practitioners upon request. So this is similar to a role of a clinical pharmacist. We do offer this service. So I'll give recommendations based on the practitioner's diagnosis. And we would suggest that it's all part of the service. Another thing is that patient consultation. That's should be the duties of pharmacists, whether it's the herbal pharmacists or Western pharmacists. We're there to help guide the patients, interpret and reinforce some of the prescriber's instructions. This could be sometimes cooking instructions. This could be sometimes dietary restrictions, clarifications of them. Just simple questions. We oftentimes avoid answering any clinical questions or drug-herb interaction questions. We usually direct it back to the practitioners. But overall, the general questions like that, we try to answer very generally as we can. So it's all part of the service. So we're going to talk about the different types of herbal prescriptions that we oftentimes see in the dispensary. As I did, main type, number one is raw herb prescriptions. These are just the raw herb scripts that you may be familiar with. These are just the raw herbs that are put together. And then, as I mentioned earlier about the raw herb prescriptions, where it's cooked and vacuum packed, these probably the type one, the raw herb prescriptions, is probably for us maybe 2/3 of our prescriptions that come in. I would categorize that type. The next type is the herbal granule prescriptions, right? These are the herbal granules, whether it's loose powder or it is encapsulated, right? These are the next most common type. We do get about 1/3 of them or this type of prescriptions. And then lastly is the herbal prescription for topical applications, compresses and salves. And those are not as common, but people do put in prescriptions for them, and we see them here and there. Okay, we're going to talk about the first type, which is the raw herb prescriptions, right? And they consist mostly of dry plant materials. It could be animal products, sometimes animal derivatives, or even minerals, even, right? This includes roots, leaves, barks, and other botanical substances. And what people may not know is that herbs are oftentimes processed before they can be used for prescriptions. So it's not like you can just pluck it out of the ground and just use it. They have to be cleaned, they have to be cut, they have to be processed. And sometimes they also have to be processed and rendered safe for use, as they're in nature, they're actually toxic. An example of that would be aconite root, and they have to be processed. Now, we do not do that here in the United States. These are done by skilled workers in China, licensed skilled workers, technicians in China. It is a licensed craft over there, and you have to be a licensed factory to do this, to render things, especially treating herbs that are toxic. So these are actually done in China. In the old days, part of the cutting and cleaning we would do here in the United States, but nowadays it's all done in China. Typically custom blends comprising a combination of herbs, and they are seldom employed as single herbs. As you heard from Dr. Chen earlier, herbs are oftentimes meant to be used in combinations, right? And this, I would say, is the fundamental difference between Chinese herbal medicine and other disciplines of herbology. And depending on the patient, the combination or the dose of the individual herbs within the combination can change. So when someone asks what herb is good for this or that condition, we know right away that they're not familiar with Chinese medicine, right? Because it's not individual herbs. If you just look at the picture here, there's I don't know how many is in that picture. I don't think they're even done with that, but there's like 7 or 8. And our electronic prescription system did an average. For this presentation, I actually asked them to run the number. The median number of herbs is 12. So in general, 12 herbs, all right, is the median number of herbs that go in a prescription, a raw herb prescription. So herbs are meant to be used in combinations. They're not used singularly. So it is extremely strange, unfamiliar for a Chinese medicine practitioner, our profession, to see individual herbs as a supplement in the pharmacies. They're sold as a single unit, especially single herbs, Chinese herbs. That's extremely strange. And I think that's also where you can run into problems when you use high dose single herbs, because they're not traditionally meant to be used that way. Okay, so a little about that. 3 often draws, the raw herbal prescriptions often draw from established formulas that remain clinically effective in modern times and are customized by practitioners to suit each patient's unique conditions. So practitioners often adhere to established formulas that remain clinically effective in modern times. Chinese medicine, like many other medical disciplines, we continue to evolve, right, and change and adapt. There are a number of TCM universities in China that continue to do research on the effectiveness of formulation to treat modern conditions, and they establish protocols for the profession. So, and because of that, the universities teach these traditional formulas that's still applicable to modern conditions today, and it filters down here to the United States, the institutions here, and we teach them that way. So, and formulations that are no longer used, that are no longer safe, those are gone. Those are not taught anymore, or we teach them not to use them. So, so the point is that practitioners, oftentimes, they are drawn from established formulations, from universities and university hospitals. So it's not like people just making things up as they go. Patients are typically required to take the raw herbal formulas home and decoct the herbs by boiling them to prepare their daily dose. So the word decoct is not a common word that many people know. The definition of decoction is a method of preparing herbal remedies by boiling or simmering plant materials in water. And it's a conventional and widely accepted definition, right? That's for now. So people have to bring them home. You see right here in the picture, they would take that, we would wrap that, then patients would bring it home. They would put it in their stainless steel pot or glass pots, and they would have to cook it for like 40 minutes or so. And they strain, and then they would drink it. And that's the work that they have to do. And you can see that could be a challenge if you have to take it for a while. Which brings us to the next point. The duration of the treatment regimen can vary, spanning from several days to several weeks. So, so typically on the short end, it's 2 to 3 days. On the long end, it could be several weeks, maybe even a month. But oftentimes, formulas have to be changed as the conditions improve, right? Or lack of improvement. Formulas also have to be changed that way. So that's at the discretion of the practitioner. Lastly, most potent type of dosage form of herbs is raw herbs. Raw herb prescription is the strongest, and for acute conditions, raw herbs is oftentimes used. In the literature that describes the efficacy of herbs, is based on raw herbs, not the pills, not the granules, not the other types. So this remains to today the most important and most potent form of herbs that you can take. Next, we're going to talk about raw herb prescriptions. This is the service, cooking and vacuum packing. Basically, we take the raw herbs prescription and we cook it and we package the liquid teas in these vacuum packages. And you can see in the picture here, that's our facility here in Manhattan. And you're all welcome to come and visit. And you can see the facility for yourself. We have a cooking service, and this cooking service can eliminate the hassle of cooking teas for a patient. Now, imagine if you have to cook for a week, then you would have to take the herbs for your patient. You're already feeling sick. You have to cook it every day, and it can be tiresome. And or you may not prepare it correctly, or worse, you may burn it. Well, I don't know if it's worse, but it's definitely not good to burn it. And also, you need to be home to cook the herbs, right? So if you're traveling, that's out, right? So you can see there's limitations if you have to cook the herbs yourself. So we provide the service that we can cook it and pouch it for you. Benefits of using stainless steel pressure cooker. As you can see in the picture, the cooking units that we use are stainless steel cookers. And these are closed unit cookers. If you see here, capacity range from 22 liters to 45 liters and can cook up to 60 days of raw herbs, right? So these are pretty big size cookers, right? Depending on how many days you need, we have different size cookers. And the superiority of this is that when we cook herbs at home on the stovetop, you may lose volatile oils, right? When you cook it in these closed unit stainless steel cookers, since it's a closed unit, the volatile oil is not lost, right? So you get actually much more out of the herbs, right? So this is actually very good. And, just besides the fact that it will be cooked properly and you won't burn it, it's a real benefit, increases compliance by a lot. Another benefit is the shelf life. 30 days shelf life at room temperature and 60 days with refrigeration. So once you get the liquid pouches, the tea pouches, you don't need to refrigerate them, and provided you put it at 75 degrees Celsius room temperature, they will last 30 days. Or if you put it in the refrigerator, it lasts up to 60 days. So you actually can travel with it if you need to. We ship these guys all over the country. And then it makes life so much easier for the patient. One thing that we also, the benefit is the concentration. The concentration needs to be the same every time. If you're cooking at a home, you need to use the same amount of water every time, and you need to do it correctly every time. Not everyone does, but when we do it for you, it will be correct every time. The amount of water and cooking time, the preparation methods are recorded digitally, right? And this is crucial, right? Because certain herbs will absorb more water than others. And you need to have the same concentration every time, right? You can't have one time whereas you don't have enough water, and then one time you use too much water. That is not ideal, right? And sometimes you get a little bit of the variation when you cook at home. It's not the end of the world, but it's not necessarily ideal. And if you want to have it prepared correctly, this is the way to go. The vacuum pack pouch is about 120 milliliters, and they're packaged in FDA-approved polyethylene pouches. These are the same plastics that are used in condiments, right? Like soy sauce, ketchups, mayo, whatever. These are the same type of plastic. They're bisphenol A free. So, this is not new technology. This has been around. Imagine a big ketchup package, I guess. Start to finish, this process takes approximately an hour and 20 minutes, right? If you were cooking at home, it's 40 minutes. We do it actually as long as, the units take longer, but it's not a worry. Even though it's cooking longer duration, it's fine. It's not a big deal. The volatile oils will stay in there. Decoctions are pasteurized at high temperature before vacuum package, extend shelf life. This is actually very important. Again, the same thing with condiments. They cook for about 110 degrees Celsius inside the unit, and then they package it about 95 degrees Celsius. Decrease the bacterial count. There's little air in the vacuum pack liquids, so that's how they last. That's how they last that long. Our facility is FDA registered facility, and the CGMP compliance, which stands for Current Good Manufacturers Practice Compliance. So we got audited by the FDA. This fall with FDA standards, stainless steel counters, the surface tops, the way you can be cleaned with bleach solution. It needs to be a maintenance record and all these things. And it is a good thing that the FDA is doing this. So make sure that this is done correctly. Ready to consume after mixing and reheating, no reconstitution needed. All you have to do is when you get the pouch, cut the corner, pour it into a cup, right? Stir it up a little bit because that does precipitate, heat it up, and you're ready to go. Next, we're going to talk about herbal granule prescriptions. Herbal granules are concentrated extracts of raw herbs created through a process that involves low temperature extraction, concentration, and drying of decoction, available as a single herb ingredients and pre-made formulas. In a nutshell, this is just low temperature extraction with water and oil-soluble components extracted separately, and then they both recombine with the pharmaceutical starch. Generally, we use dextrin or maltodextrin. These are just your typical pharmaceutical starch, no big deal. This is actually the strongest dosage form after raw herbs, right? And it's not as strong as raw herbs. It's the next step down, but it is the second strongest. The concentration is 5:1. That means it's 5 units of raw herbs is required to make 1 unit of granules. These are manufactured in an FDA facility, in a GMP facility in China, good manufacturers facilities. Yes, the FDA do have offices in China, and these facilities all have to be registered, and they have to follow all the rules and regulations, the heavy metal testing and all the testing that Dr. Chen talked about, which I will also touch on too later. That's all there. So it is a heavily regulated industry. Resembles instant coffee in appearance and water solubility. As in the picture, you see they'll look like instant coffee. All you have to do is measure it out with a spoon, put it into the mug or your cup, and then you put in hot water and you're ready to go, right? So it's like, so this has high patient compliance. You can travel with it. It's light. It's relatively less expensive than raw herbs. One downside, I don't know if it's a downside, but it still has an herby taste, right? Because it's not as bad as the raw herbs decoction, the tea, but you still have to taste it, right? Unfortunately, now, if you don't want to taste it, that would be this: herbal granule prescriptions encapsulated. Capsules are ideal for those who prefer not to have to prepare the herbs or taste the herbs. Okay. Generally, these are size 00 capsules. 00 is all really go. We don't really want to go any size bigger because then it's what we call pharmacists call horse pills, right? That's way too big for people to swallow. And these are generally vegetarian capsules nowadays. Downside is the amount of capsules needed can be intimidating. For example, a size 00 capsule can hold about 700 milligrams. So if you have to take, for example, 10 grams of herbs a day, which is not a lot, by the way, you would have to swallow 15 capsules. And you tell a patient, try to swallow 15 capsules all at once, it's a lot. So oftentimes practitioners, right, they would tell their patients to split it up into 3. So it could be 5 capsules 3 times a day. It's a little bit more manageable, but nonetheless, it's a lot of capsules to swallow, right? Definitely divided doses. The other downside is cost of encapsulation is relatively high because it's very labor intensive, and we have machines that actually can decrease the labor is less even with machine, but nonetheless you have to clean the machine for after every batch. It is labor expensive, and labor is very expensive these days. It is not cheap, so it does add up to the costs. Now, even with the cost of the extra encapsulation, it's still relatively less than raw herbs, nonetheless. Still relatively high patient compliance because people are familiar with capsules and pills where they can easily swallow them. It's not a big deal. Popular traditional formulations are readily available in capsule form. So that's one positive side. They do have traditional formulations. that they are ready in capsule. They're made into capsules from the factory, so these are not custom. So the downside to that is you can't have a custom formulation. As I mentioned earlier, one of the beauty of this medicine is that we do a very individualized therapeutic option for you. So you give that up when you do a preset traditional formula from the factory, right? But it's an option. Herbal prescriptions for topical applications. These are compresses, lavages, salves, ointments, liniments, etc. I'll give you some common examples. Lavages and washes, examples, vaginitis, dermatological conditions, etc. I would say vaginal wash is probably most common that we dispense, especially for labial irritation associated with UTIs, yeast infections. Practitioners would prescribe a raw herb formula that we would put it in a gauze bag for them, and they would cook it, and then they would use that as a lavage, a wash. And there are a good number of formulas that specifically address that type of problem, and it's a relatively common thing. And now I want to stress that the topical wash is not meant to be used alone. Oftentimes is used in conjunction with a internal herbal formula. Another one that we do a good number of is the compresses for eye irritations, joint inflammation, etc. I'll take the example of the eye irritation. There's an herb called coptis root. It's a very commonly prescribed compress that we use. And that is a single herb, so that's one instance. It could be a single herb used for eye irritation, styes, and things like that. And this has been used traditionally for minor eye irritations for a very long time with good efficacy. And it's very simple to use. So we dispense that a lot. Sometimes it could be a formula for joint inflammation compresses. They could be cold compresses, warm compresses. It runs the gamut, and different combinations of them. So we do prepare that as well. Next, we have salves, ointments. It could be for a variety of dermatological conditions such as eczema, psoriasis, also trauma as well. So these are compounded with fine powder raw herbs incorporated in a variety of bases, including simple sesame oil base. Sometimes it could be in white petrolatum. Sometimes it could be PEG, polyethylene glycol. That's another petroleum product that we use as a base. The historical traditional base like egg yolk, no one really uses that. I mean, egg white, no one really uses that anymore. But now we use more advanced, you want to say, modern bases. So now I don't know how many pharmacists are listening to this talk right now, having training in compounding topical ointments. Maybe I'm showing my age, but I was in the last class at the University of Buffalo to have to learn how to compound. Really, it's yeah. So nowadays, I don't think pharmacists are trained for that anymore, unless maybe it's like after you graduate and you learn how to do that. But anyway, so yeah, we do a lot of those, and practitioners would put in a prescription, and then we would have these herbs powdered, not granules, powdered, and then into very fine powder, right? It's like usually a mill that mills it into very fine powder, and then we put it into the bases. Very common one that we use is white pets, right? White petrolatum. Lastly, we have liniments for chronic joint pain, minor skin irritations. It could be alcoholic extractions. Sometimes we use traditional rice wines. Sometimes we use isopropyl alcohol that work too. Or sometimes it could be non-alcoholic extractions, right? It could be oil extraction. That could be sesame oil, probably the most common one. So many of you probably heard of trauma liniments, particularly in the martial arts world. If you're familiar with that, the Titta Jio, the trauma liniments, literally translated, it's hit wine or hit alcohol, which is just basically an herbal extraction, and sometimes they extract it in alcohol for trauma. That's very common. A lot of people know that. So a lot of the martial arts studios, they would order their own liniments. Sometimes practitioners would ask that we make certain liniments for their patients. So this, and we do that. And again, those tend to be a little bit more expensive as opposed to the more commercially available, prepared and available formulas. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the evaluating herbal quality and variations. There are four categories: chromatographic analysis, chromatography, chemical fingerprinting, traditional knowledge, and organoleptic evaluation. Right, so you can see this combination. So yeah, let's talk about those. Let's just jump right into it. So chromatography analysis, HPLC, high performance liquid chromatography, and other chromatographic techniques are commonly used to identify and quantify the active compounds in botanicals. And this method helps determine the concentration of key constituents, such as specific active compounds or marker compounds, which are responsible for the therapeutic effects of herbs. There's chemical fingerprinting. The Chinese pharmacopoeia and the other standards are required for establishment of chemical fingerprints for herbal ingredients. These fingerprints serve as a reference profile, showcasing the unique chemical composition of a particular botanical. And these techniques are very important in verifying the identity of herbs. And using visual features as a means of identification may sometimes be sufficient in some instances. However, it would be incomplete without the chemical analysis, especially when we're dealing with herbs that already have been processed, such as granules and those instances. There's no way that you can tell, right? So this is actually very important. The Chinese pharmacopoeia, the standard is set. It was set minimal standards, and herb can be called that of such an herb if it has these constituents, and they would meet these minimal standards. That's very, very important. But that's not the complete picture, because we need to talk about these other two: organoleptic evaluation, sensory evaluation, including visual examination, aroma assessment, and taste testing. It's an integral part of evaluating herb quality in China. Purveyors who source herbs may use their senses to detect variations in appearance, smell, and taste that can provide clues about the potency and the authenticity of the botanicals. Traditional knowledge. So actually, let's talk about the organoleptic evaluation first. This remains to be very important even today. Even with the advent of chromatography, most of our professions still rely on this on top of the chromatography, which does not tell you everything. Just because an herb meets the minimal standard, like it has these constituents, it does not mean it's the highest quality. Sensory evaluation also tells you the quality of the herbs at the moment. Herbs are botanicals and have shelf life, and the chromatography paperwork will not tell you if a batch is spoiled or has expired, right? So if it comes with the paperwork and just say, okay, it has these things, but the constituents could be lost, especially if they have a lot of, if it's aromatic, a lot of aromatic oils. So if they're sitting in someone's warehouse, just because you have the papers, it doesn't help you all that much. So buyers, people who handle herbs, they would have to smell the herbs, just like all of us, right? When we go and buy spices, you smell the spices, right? You want to make sure, right? And you look at the color, right? How fresh it is. The lab work is not going to tell you the quality of herbs. They just tell you the minimal standards of the herbs. That's something that in our profession is very important. Traditional knowledge. Traditional Chinese medicine practitioners rely on the extensive knowledge and experience to assess the potency of botanicals. This may consider, they may consider factors such as the region where the herbs are grown, the methods of cultivation, historical usage patterns. This is so very important in our profession, and I think many of us can relate to this. In our profession, herbs need to be from an area where it's been cultivated and processed. Again, processed, right? Because we mentioned earlier, it's not just pluck it out of the ground and use it. They have to be processed in order to render, to have its function, its therapeutic function. and care for, and for many generations. For example, the highest quality Chen pea, which is a type of tangerine peel, right? Like what tangerine peel? Which one? Which species? Well, in Chinese medicine, we know the botanical name of that particular species, but more importantly, we know the area that it is from. It is from Xinhui district within Guangdong province. All right, and we would not purchase this herb outside of this region, regardless of what the chromatography report tells us, right? In that region, the people are the stewards of that particular herb, and they have a legacy from the generations of planting and replanting this herb and making sure it's the highest quality. Now, we can actually relate to this. Many of us, for example, we would not purchase wine, right, that are made in New Jersey, right? Outside of the middle. If it was grown outside of the Meadowlands, I don't think one of us would drink that. It's because we know that certain wines should be from a specific regions of the world where certain type of grapes are grown and processed and cared for and made. And this is so important that when we buy wines, we look for the region that they're from. It is the same with herbs. As a matter of fact, many of the herb names has within this name the region that is grown. Okay, so that tells you how important it is, right? If it's important for wines and grapes, it's important for herbs, just as important. We're going to talk a little bit about comprehensive testing in herbal products. I know Dr. Chen talked about it, but I'll quickly talk about this. One of the things that we test is heavy metal. Heavy metal testing is lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium. The FDA requires that all dietary supplements have to be in compliance. I think Dr. Chen also tell you about the parts per million. I'm not going to go into it here. Microbial contamination, E. coli, salmonella, yeast, molds, bacterial count, mold count. These are all part of the paperwork that is required. So I second what Dr. Chen said. Our industry, our profession, herbs are highly regulated. And because I think that all the years of people have this, Chinese herbs are contaminated, they're full of heavy metals because of this misperception or misconception of this. I would say that it's the burdens on us to make sure that we have all these paperwork and to do the right thing, right? We'll also do pesticide testing as well. There's a whole bunch of pesticides. And guess who sells all the pesticides? To China. Good old USA. So we do export a lot of that. And the funny thing is, in the United States, the consumers are driving the organic movements in China. So there is a good thing because we're willing to pay more than the domestic population in China, and because we want herb-less, lab-tested products and organic products. So there is, and farmers can earn 2, 3, 4 times the amounts for organic products. So you actually are seeing a growth of that, and I'm looking forward to that. So I want to, the point of the slide should let you guys know that it's coming. Organic herbs are coming, and that Chinese herbs are not as lawless as some people think. Next, I'm going to talk about technological innovations in herbal dispensary. Tech innovation is not something that one would associate with our profession and Chinese medicine profession, herbal dispensary. But as I would point out here, you'll be surprised. And I'm going to talk about the 3 main systems that we have in our dispensary. I'm only going to talk about 2 because for time's sake. I'm going to talk about eScript system, which basically is our advanced electronic prescription system that started in 2005, which predates the widespread adoption in many Western pharmacies. I think Western pharmacies started in the 2010s, perhaps. The next is the GAC granular AccuCheck system. Is a digital system for herbal granules. Ensures precise dispensing with barcode technology, which seamlessly track lot numbers and expiration dates, enhancing traceability and safety. And we have a slide. And then lastly, integration with our TCM suite, which is an EMR software that we developed for Chinese medicine practitioners. So our electronic prescription system seamlessly integrate with the electronic medical record system. And it helps the practitioner just seamlessly prescribe, and it goes right into electronic system. And it's really, sometimes I'm a little taken back by how far our profession have gone for that. And I know it took, in Western medicine, right, it took a lot of teeth pulling to drag these people across the line to use the EMR and all that. So same of our profession, but I think that we're a little bit more willing to adopt. All right, so let's talk about the electronic prescription system that we have. So ours is called the Kamwo eScript system. Basically, Kamwo's proprietary eScript system, a HIPAA compliant electronic prescription platform. This is advanced functionalities include translations of English-based prescriptions to Chinese, dosage accuracy checks, right? So if you write more than, if your dose is higher, the system will stop you and just raise a red flag. There's patient dietary restriction alerts. So if your patient's allergic to seafoods or derivatives, or they have animal derivatives, dietary restrictions, or they're vegans, whatnot, the system will alert you. And also herb-to-herb interaction monitoring as well. So these advanced functionalities. Our system was introduced back in 2005, as I mentioned earlier, before the electronic prescriptions were common in Western pharmacies. In a way, we had a distinct advantage now in the Chinese medicine profession, because we didn't have an existing system of efficiently getting prescription information from English to Chinese, right? So everything had to be manual, and it was so labor intensive, and mistakes can be easily made. And e-prescriptions solve this problem, right? So we have the benefit of not having any computers, systems that actually did that, and we're in Western pharmacies. We had something, right? So it's like we can drag our feet in adopting new technology. We didn't have that benefit. So this platform is HIPAA compliant, includes checks for dosage. Okay, we talked about that. Accuracies, patient dietary restrictions. And also it can also track the number of times a formula like that can be refilled, right? So historically, refills was not really a thing in Chinese, in the herbal dispensary, but that's something that we have introduced, and many other of our competitors also have adopted too. And it actually makes a lot of sense, right? And we're very proud to introduce that, because we do not want patients just keep taking the same formula over at their own discretion. No, we don't do that. So we have that too. Comprehensive record keeping capabilities for prescriptions, patients, and practitioners. So record keeping is crucial in any dispensary. Accurate record keeping is required for GMP compliance. And by the way, the FDA has jurisdiction over compounding dispensaries. I don't know if you know that. They reserve the right to check up on us when they can. It's actually a gray area, but they have, and then they do it every few years. And we've been ordered a number of times. And they always make sure that we have an electronic record system in place in case of recalls. They need to see that. This software also integrates with our GAC granule AccuCheck system for digital herbal granule prescription filling, which is on the next slide we'll talk about, and trackability of prescription history, enabling efficient patient care. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide, which is the granular AccuCheck system. GAC, Kamwo's state-of-the-art digital system for filling and compounding granule prescriptions with precision, utilizing barcode technology to verify the accuracy of herbal granules and their qualities. Once the electronic prescriptions are received, processed, and checked by the system, it is sent to our granulars compounding station, right? So each bottle of herbal ingredients, you can see in the picture, there's little bottles that have a barcode. And the barcode, once it's scanned, it verified the identity of the herb that's actually being being dispensed. So you can see on screen right now, there on the monitor, that's the prescription that's pulled up. And when the technician scans the bottle and you see the yellow highlighted, that it verified that is the herb, that is, you got the right herb. And then there's a digital scale where you will weigh it, and then it would verify the weight is actually correct. So this eliminates mistakes. This is very, very important. Prior to this system, believe it or not, we had to do it by hand. You can imagine the number of human errors, right, that can happen. So as you can see, the first point here, performs mathematical calculations for precise dosing, minimizing human errors. That's a big thing. And it's also, as part of the GMP, good manufacturer practice, even though we're not a manufacturer, the FDA wants dispensaries also to have that. Ensure safety, accuracy, and quality control in herbal formula dispensing. Tracks and records granular lot numbers and expiration dates for easy traceability. What Dr. Chen said earlier, those ingredients that do not pass, right, they have to be pulled, right? Or if you find out later, that's what the lot numbers would tell you. The system can pull out all the lot numbers. Enhances overall dispensary efficiency while minimizing human error, right? That's very, very important. All right, so I am going to move on for the sake of time because we're getting close. I think the last slide, I'm not going to talk about the, in my original slide, I was going to talk about our electronic medical record system, but I don't think it's as applicable as I think this one. So I want to talk a little bit about the TCM practitioners themselves. I know Dr. Chen that talk about it, but there's some things I want you guys to know that may not be intuitive. The healthcare providers behind all these herbal prescriptions. There are 46 US states that have a licensing requirement for acupuncture, right? And many of them include herbology in their scope of license. New York's like that, California, Ohio, Florida. Many of the big states are like that. And there are approximately 38,000 as of 2018 acupuncturists. So there's not that many of us. The educational requirements, what people may or may not know, is that it's a 3 to 4 year graduate program on top of your undergrad, which is 4 years, right? Your undergrad can be about 4 years, and then you have another 3.5 years for the master's. Or if you go through, get the doctorate, is 6 years. So in totality, including your undergrad, we're looking at 10 years, right? That's many, many years. There are approximately 50 accredited Chinese medicine institutions in the United States. The curriculum, it's comprehensive curriculum. Their education encompasses a broad spectrum of subjects, which include Western sciences, which many people may be surprised when I talk. They have to learn anatomy, biochemistry, pathophysiology, physics, pharmacology, physiology, physical exams, ONE, orthoneural evaluations, and more. And in addition to the regular Chinese, on top of that, they have to take their Chinese medicine classes. Now, I've taken this program. The Western sciences is not as rigorous as our Western. I mean, like when pharmacy school, when we did the disease and therapeutics, and it's much more rigorous because we have 3 semesters. Pharmacology, we have like 2-3 semesters. They only have 1 semester, right, of it. But nonetheless, they're exposed to it. It's taught by, oftentimes pharmacists or Western professors in the Western science. So they do have this knowledge. I think a lot of people may not know that. The next thing I also want to point out is the diversity. And here's the thing that I tell people, it blows many people away. The majority of practitioners and their patients are not ethnically Chinese or Asian. So a lot of people think that they have this stereotype. It's like some old Chinese man behind a beaded curtain. And that's the person that would be the stereotypical Hollywood picture of what a Chinese medicine practitioner is. And it's not really the truth. Here's some statistics that'll help you. About 58 to 60% of practitioners are white. 20% are Asians, right? That includes Indians and Koreans, of course, Chinese as well. And about 10% are Hispanics. 10.7% is Hispanics. And then another 6% is just people with mixed race. So you can see that easily the majority, overwhelming majority of practitioners are not Asian. This is not exclusive to Chinese practitioners or Asian practitioners. Lastly, clinical oversight. I think this is an important point. TCM practitioners have clinical oversight of herbal prescriptions for their patients. So this is not just, oh, here, let me just recommend a formulation that you can buy over the counter, and then you're not clinically responsible. When you write a prescription for your patient, you are clinically responsible for the outcome, good or bad, okay? And their license is on the line. Yes, they have to have malpractice insurance for that. So this is a regulated industry. It's not perfect. It always could be better, and we're always working to be better. But I just want to give everyone, pharmacists, an idea who the players are in this profession. Okay, I think that brings to the end. And this is my contact information, tleung@kamwo.com. If you have any questions, if I don't get to your questions today, feel free to email me. Okay, let's see. Okay, so is Jamie or Rebecca? Am I not hearing? I'm not hearing any voices. Let me see. My sound is off or something. Let me see. Give me a second. I'm sorry.
Just 1 second. I apologize.
Okay, okay. I thought it was me.
Nope, nope. We're having some issues. Just 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, so I will be taking over the Q&A portion. So I will try to do my best. I'm not a subject matter expert, so if I pronounce anything wrong, I do apologize. But the first question I have for you is, where do traditional Chinese medicine practitioners receive their knowledge? Are there universities in China offering degrees?
So there are, as I mentioned, there are about 50 accredited schools in the United States that offer degrees. And of course, there are TCM universities in China. There's a number of them, 4 big ones, actually 6 big ones in China.
Perfect. And then the next question is, which regulatory agency oversees the herbal dispensaries? How often do the dispensary need to renew their license, if any?
Okay, so 1, there is no license. It is under the jurisdiction of the FDA. The FDA, we have asked them a number of times, how often do you come back? They will not tell us, but patterns have shown it's every 3 to 4 years that they will come back. If there's no problems, if there's a complaint, they can actually come back sooner than that. And we are not a manufacturer per se, we're a dispensary. And we told them that we're a dispensary, we're not a manufacturer, but the FDA, this is the Jamaica district in New York, says, well, that still falls under our jurisdiction. And I actually wrote a letter to complain to them that dispensaries are not are exempt, but they insist that they will they have jurisdiction over us. So it's a gray area, but if they come in, I can't stop them, right? So that's what it is.
Great, thank you. Is there any health insurance that covers the cost of herbal prescriptions?
No, no, the health insurance just cover the acupuncture right now. So they do not cover herbal prescriptions. There are flex spending accounts that if you give them a receipt that they can expense that. And that's the extent, that's it.
Great, thank you. The next question, are your products primarily sold over the counter or do a majority require a prescription?
So any custom formulations will require a prescription. There are a number of products that are over the counter, and that could be ours that we put out, like traditional formulas that can be over the counter, or some other company's third party. But the more potent custom formulations, they require a prescription. So it's just not anybody just write any formula, just come in and refill it. We just don't.
Great, thank you. And the next question, does the dispensary still operate under the same laws typically required of a retail pharmacy, or are there additional regulations?
No, so we actually, the Board of Pharmacy came into our establishment. And so we used to be called Herbal Pharmacy, and they told us to take off pharmacy. They want to make sure that's dispensary. Because if we were truly a pharmacy like a Western pharmacy, it would be subject to the regulations. So it's not regulated. So we're under regulations of FDA under food, right? Food and drug. So that would be under food. And so the FDA and the Department of Agriculture in New York State are the only two entities that regulate us right now.
And the last question, do providers prescribe actual recipe or do you decide the actual ingredients similar to how medical marijuana is prescribed?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yep, the question is, do providers prescribe actual recipes or do you decide the actual ingredients similar to how medical marijuana is prescribed?
No, it's always the practitioner would have a very precise herbal formula, herbal prescription, exactly with the dosing and everything. We would look it over like any pharmacy would, and to make sure that it's safe. And if it is, we would dispense it.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, I am going to stop the recording now.